What's going on, guys? Bengal here for another mock draft on Mock Draft Monday. You guessed it. If you want more draft content, more mock drafts, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's go ahead and jump right into things where I inevitably upset at least 60% of the Bears fan base. And we're going to mix it up today by selecting quarterback Drake May out of North Carolina, #1, because the Bears have never struggled with a UNC quarterback taken to the top of the draft before. Yes, Mitch Trubisky. What a fun start. I think Drake May is still in play for the first quarterback off the board. We've been saying it for a while. It's pretty much QB 1A, 1B. It depends what you want. Do you like the guy that's a better improviser or the guy that's better in structure? Different teams are going to have different guys ranked higher or lower, and in this case, we take Drake May #1. Now, will this actually happen? It is scout the player, not the helmet. Certain idiots will think that, oh, the Bears could never take a UNC quarterback because the last one was bad. That has no bearing on it at all. You would hope. You want the better player regardless of where they went to school. It's such a brain-dead take that I think people try to connect the dots that don't really exist to make themselves seem smarter. There is no take at all in regards to, oh, this player went to this school, he's going to be bad because of another player who went to that same school. It's stupid. But that would leave the Patriots available to take Caleb Williams. So we are switching it up slightly. Still a quarterback at the top of the board for each of these two teams. They both probably do need quarterbacks. The Bears are in a little bit of a tougher spot because Justin Fields is at a level where you might consider just sticking with Justin Fields, trading down, getting a haul. Maybe you would go Marvin Harrison Jr. #1, although I find that unlikely. The Bears, I think if they end up having the #1 overall pick, they might just try to take a quarterback. And we'll see if that ends up happening. Cardinals at #3. It's still pretty much got to be Marvin Harrison Jr. until, nothing. I don't know. I don't know what a player could do to elevate themselves above Marvin Harrison Jr. as a receiver. And Malik Neighbors did about as much as he could have done, right? He had a Biletnikoff type season where maybe he should have even won it, definitely produced more than Marvin Harrison Jr., and still MHJ is considered the best receiver prospect in this draft. And from my personal standpoint, I actually think it's fairly close. I really do. Marvin Harrison Jr. is a very solid route runner with more size than Neighbors, phenomenal hands, and really what stands out to me when I watch him is the ability to adjust to the football when it's not thrown in the perfect spot. His adjustments in the air, his body control, all exceptional. He makes the plays that you just don't expect the guy to make. You expect it to be incomplete, and he just finds a way to make that catch anyway. And that, as I've said before, is what I think kind of separates some of these special players. They make the plays you don't expect them to make, as well as the plays that you should make. Malik Neighbors, though, is fantastic. We'll talk about him in a minute. For the past several mock drafts that I've done, I have had the Commanders sticking and picking and going Olu Fashanu from Penn State. I think that's still a very good possibility. However, I am going to mix it up today, and that is based purely on the fact that Sam Howell was benched-ish for Jacoby Brissett, who then ended up outplaying him on that for the rest of the final couple of minutes. The Commanders were still in the game. I don't know if it was weird injury or what, but if this is what it comes down to. If a new head coach comes in, because I think we can all agree Ron Rivera is not going to be the head coach of the Commanders in 2024. When Ron Rivera is ultimately fired, does a new head coach come in and say, oh, we don't want Sam Howell to be our franchise quarterback, 5th-round draft pick, make some splash plays, make some dumb plays. We're just going to move on with our top pick, take one of the best players in the entire draft. And that, after 2023, is Jaden Daniels. Exceptional talent, and he's not being moved up so far because he won the Heisman. It's because of the incremental adjustments and upgrades he made over the course of the year for his game. He really evolved as a passer. He's able to go through progressions and really throw the ball accurately, especially down the field, and we know what he can do as a runner. So if you're a new head coach coming in, maybe a new staff entirely, right? Do you want to stick with Sam Howell or Jacoby Brissett as your franchise quarterback? Maybe not. Jaden Daniels could present himself as a great pickup at this particular spot. And then it leaves the Bears at #5, I believe, to go Malik Neighbors in this sense. So what does Neighbors do better than Marvin Harrison Jr.? He's a more explosive player, no question, and he's better after the catch. Now, I still prefer Marvin Harrison Jr. as a prospect, but that's not to say that Malik Nabers is not exceptional in his own right. Again, extremely explosive, and he's a guy that can do that underneath with the football and run after the catch. So good after the catch, but also win deep over the top with great long speed. Malik Nabers is a really, really awesome receiver prospect. Probably will end up being my receiver number 2, and that's the reason why I keep mocking him as the second receiver off the board. Now, you guys know I do these mock drafts based on what I think will happen, not what I would do necessarily, but in this case, when we're still kind of far out, it's December 18th, we don't know how teams are going to feel about these receivers until we get a little bit closer, or any player in the draft, right? So a lot of it is, well, I think from my personal evaluation, I think Nabers will end up being the second receiver off the board, but things could change. When it looked like it was Keon Coleman, I elevated Keon Coleman a bit. But yeah, Nabers to me, I think, is the best receiver other than Marvin Harrison Jr. in this draft. Jets at 6. I think you really have your pick of the tackles. Our offensive line is absolutely horrendous. You want to score points? Well, it's not always with the flashy players. It's with the guys up front that can create time for your quarterback. In this case, of course, it would be Aaron Rodgers staying healthy, you hope, and Olu Fashanu would be a good way to do that. Really athletic, I would say pass protect first offensive tackle. He would slide in seamlessly at left tackle, which has been a problem for the Jets this season. They don't score points, and their offensive line is terrible. Giants at 7, you could say a lot of the same things about the Giants, and I think in this scenario, I think the Giants would go offensive line. Joe Alt being available at 7 ends up being pretty good value for the Giants. Yes, this puts the career and future of Evan Neal into question. Joe Alt would be sliding over to play right tackle. What does that mean for Evan Neal? Do you play him at guard? Well, he is a good run blocker, and that could make his job a lot easier because pass protecting on an island is a problem for Evan Neal. However, if you can just move him to guard, which is a transition that's easier said than done, keep in mind, but it is an easier pass protecting position. And you can use your size and athleticism in the run game, which Evan Neal certainly has a great amount of. He's very big, he's very athletic. He struggled, I would say, fundamentally technique-wise to play the right tackle position and stop some of these great pass rushers and pick up stunts. He's just not there yet. At right guard, which I guess is where you'd move him, it would be a little bit easier for him, you'd hope. And that sets up the Chargers at 8. So I guess just go Brock Bowers. Tight end is going to be a position of need for them. We talked about it before. I've given Brock Bowers to the Chargers before, but I think this is a move that Chargers fans probably would not get tired of. He is a really, really good player. I think certainly the best tight end prospect since Kyle Pitts, and on that same level. He is a better blocker than Kyle Pitts. Maybe not quite the same athlete, but still a very good tight end prospect. Great receiver with very good hands, very good after the catch, and one of the few tight ends that we've talked about really in any of these past several cycles that's capable of taking a ball to the house. We don't really think of tight ends as the players that can do that quite often. It's really more inline blockers and chain movers in the passing game. It's not really guys that can take the top off a defense or eliminate pursuit angles. Brock Bowers is one of those guys that's capable of doing that. Titans at 9. They need more playmakers on offense. They also need help on the offensive line. I think I've pretty routinely given them right tackle here and given them J.C. Latham or maybe Talisa Fuaga. Maybe it's been Amarius Mims, right? This is an interesting position because, and they also need help at, corner as well. I would probably have to expect offense with this pick. And J.C. Latham just makes too much sense. I'd like to mix it up a little bit, but it just seems to be best player available at a position of need. It just makes way too much sense in my opinion. Maybe this would be a Rome Odunze or a Keon Coleman. I think that's in play. I think J.C. Latham just makes too much sense if you're the Tennessee Titans at this spot. Plug and play right tackle into your offense, and maybe even try him at left tackle. I mean, that's certainly not a secured up position either. I like the interior of their offensive line. Tackle is a nightmare. As we get to the Falcons, quarterback certainly would be in play. And here's what I'll say about the quarterbacks at this spot. I don't really feel confident about any of these guys being top 10 picks. And that certainly goes for Bo Nix, Michael Penix, Shadur Sanders, we'll see if he even enters the draft. Carson Beck, same deal. J.J. McCarthy, same deal. Quinn Ewers, same deal. It is certainly up in the air. So, with not feeling as great about all of the quarterback prospects available at this point, I would opt to go for the best defensive player in the draft. And I think the first one off the board, as I continue to say, will be Dallas Turner. I think he'd be pretty much a steal at number 10 here for Atlanta that desperately needs help off the edge. And I understand quarterback as well. But in this scenario where we pushed Jaden Daniels so far up the board, there is not a quarterback that I think is for sure going to go anywhere near this range. Now, I think based on who I believe will be available in the draft up to this point, I think J.J. McCarthy continues to have the most potential to be drafted highly. I don't know that Nix is going to be a first-round pick. With injury concerns, I don't believe that Michael Penix will be a first-round pick. At Indiana, he had 4 consecutive years of season-ending injuries. These type of things, as an 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old, that is going to scare a team away, certainly a little bit. As a left-handed quarterback with a weird throwing motion that needs to work on his touch, he's got things working against him. As fun as he is, can he operate under pressure? Can he improvise? Can he extend plays? Or is he just a drop-back passer that with time in front of him, he's able to throw, darts on a line to receivers with a phenomenal receiving core? And it is. You have Rome Odunze, who is going to be a top 15 pick in this draft probably, right? You have Jalen Polk, who I'd be surprised if he went out of the top 50. Love Jalen Polk. You have Jalen McMillan, who's a deep threat without health concerns, maybe gets pushed up into the top 50 picks as well. So there are things working against Michael Penix. As fun as he is, I don't believe he's going to be one of these top guys off the board. Shadur Sanders, again, could go back to college. Carson Beck, back. J.J. McCarthy, he's just, if Michigan makes a run, who knows? His best football probably ahead of him outside of a run-heavy offense like it was at Michigan. Quinn Ewers, I expect to go back as well. Packers at 11. This is an interesting spot because the Packers are a team where they've really got to come in together with these receivers now. It's not complete by any means, right? But you have guys that are starting to really elevate. I'm a big Romeo Doubs guy. Jaden Reed probably emerging as the best receiver on that team. Christian Watson, when healthy, can be a difference maker. And that doesn't even speak to the role-playing receivers on that team, right? Like Dontavian Wicks, like even Malik Heath lately. They've got a number of really, really good receivers or up-and-coming receivers that could end up being awesome long-term. So where does that leave the Packers when we typically think they need more offensive firepower? Tight end, obviously, coming along as well. I was a huge Tucker Kraft guy in the draft. He's starting to play well now that Luke Musgrave has been sidelined with injury, who is another great up-and-coming player. What do? Tackle continues to be a big position of need for the Packers, as well as corner. I think would be two probably at the top of my list if I were drafting for them. And it's just, which player do you think is the best available of those potential needs? And at corner, you're probably talking about Nate Wiggins, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Terry and Arnold, I would say is the three. Cooper DeJean could be in that conversation and move back to safety, which is a need for the Packers as well. When you talk about a guy like Darnell Savage, who has been a little bit disappointing and with contract expiring soon. But the Packers, the world is kind of their oyster at this point. I would say they need a left tackle far more than they need a right tackle. Zach Toms played well, but Fuaga's a right tackle. Mims, maybe you shift him to left, but has been a right tackle. Barton has been a left tackle at Duke, but probably projects more as a guard. Same thing with Troy Fautanu at Washington, right? Maybe even Jordan Morgan, who I think does probably stick at tackle. Tyler Guyton could be a guy that really moves up the board. That's a name to watch out for. Really athletic player, Senior Bowl invite. We'll see if he ends up getting pushed up, but I could definitely see him end up being kind of one of those top 20 guys that didn't get a ton of hype. He kind of reminds me, and maybe this is just because Oklahoma talked about scout the player, not the helmet, but Anton Harrison kind of got moved up a lot last year at times. He was like fringe first round that ended up being like easily a first round pick. I think he was top 25 player. when it was all said and done. Maybe went at number 26 to the Jags. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, I think with maybe left tackle replacing David Bakhtiari being the biggest need, and all of these guys really being right tackles with the exception of Amarius Mims maybe moving over to the left side, I think you probably would go with a corner. And I think the first one off the board is going to end up being Nate Wiggins. Has the best combination of size and speed in this draft at corner, and a lot of hustle, big hustle player with pretty good ball skills as well. I mean, he is a nice player, and for a team that needs help at corner, I think you'd be pretty happy with Nate Wiggins. Raiders at 12. Offense is a mess. You need help on the edge as well. Corner, I mean, the Raiders, they're getting it done with Antonio Pierce. Love Antonio Pierce. Love that they're getting it done and, winning some games under him, but their roster is a bit of a mess. It's another kind of like best player available type situation. I do like the idea of taking a Laiatu Latu here, where Max Crosby's already so good, and just get somebody that you're pretty sure is going to be a sure thing on the other side. Latu's got the best combination of pass rush plan, hands, double move, counters in this whole draft. Maybe the counter moves more than double moves. Double moves, I think we might associate more of the receiver, but counter moves, if one doesn't work, he's able to transition to something else, and he's just probably the best pure pass rusher in this draft. And for the Raiders, you really need something else. And that doesn't mean that I don't respect the emergence of a Malcolm Kuntz, right? But Latu, I think, is a more sure 3-down player, whereas Kuntz can be a designated pass rusher. There's a rotation anyway. So even though corner, offensive line, quarterback, we talked about that, all of these things could be in play. I think getting a bona fide stud pass rusher on the other side of Max Crosby would be a really good move for the Raiders as an organization. Seahawks at 13. The Seahawks are in an interesting spot because they do have a lot of talent and they have emerging players as well. The receiving core, you'd say, is pretty much taken care of for the next couple of years. Quarterback, maybe a bit more in flux, right? And if this is not an offensive lineman, which I don't believe it would be based on the players available, you're going to the defensive side of the ball. And if you're drafting a defensive player, is it somebody on the edge when you already have some good edge rushers? Well, maybe it is, because even though Boye Mafe is really on the rise, and Uchenna Nwosu is a good player, how long does Nwosu last in Seattle with his contract? Maybe you want to get another guy in there, maybe a bigger guy like a Braylon Trice to keep him local, or Jared Verse, somebody with a bit more size to be a 3-down player. Nwosu has been injured, and that's not necessarily why I'm making this pick, but you can always look to upgrade the pass rush. And I think the fact of the matter is, if this is not an offensive lineman or quarterback spot, upgrading the pass rush is the best move for Seattle, and Jared Verse makes the most sense to me. He's got the size that the Seahawks typically covet at the position. He's 6'4", 260 pounds. That's a 3-down edge player for sure. And he's got really strong, powerful hands. He's still developing as a pass rusher and player as well. I think he was a tight end commit or recruit at Albany before transferring, or before kind of becoming an edge player and transferring to Florida State, where obviously he had an incredible breakout. And he's only getting better and better and better. And the Seahawks need more pass rush. Seahawks at 14, you can certainly say the same thing about them, but tackle, certainly a big need. I don't think Trevor Penning has been everything the Seahawks, or the Saints, would have wanted up to this point. The Saints are another one of those rosters that's aging, got a lot of holes. They've missed in the draft lately. And man, if you look on the edge, it's Cam Jordan, who's close to 35. It's Isaiah Foskey, who knows what he's going to end up being. It's a Peyton Turner, who is not really developed. Carl Granderson is a pretty nice player, but you have aging guys and question marks at the position. So it's certainly something they could look at this spot for sure. I like the idea of taking Amarius Mims here and then maybe transitioning him to that left side. Who knows how long Ryan Ramczyk's going to stick in New Orleans. You'd expect that to be like your guy, but you never know. He is under contract for the next few seasons at least. But left tackle is certainly more of a need, as I mentioned. So Amarius Mims in play, maybe even receiver as well. It's just, it's a team that really, again, like the draft is their oyster. They could go a number of different directions. And I think when you have a situation like that, you probably just opt to go best player available. And for me at this point, that would be Rome Odunze, or maybe a Keon Coleman type as well. Receiver, I think, is a need for the Saints. And I like Chris Olave, obviously, quite a bit. But you need something else. Can't rely on Michael Thomas at this point. We know that. Rashid Shaheed's a nice deep threat. Rome Odunze is a deep threat, but more of a, I would say, 3-down type of player. Can win in a lot of different phases of the game. Underneath, intermediate, especially deep down the field. So you're building a bit of a track team in New Orleans, but you also have guys that can work underneath and win after the catch as well, make the tough catches. Odunze is both a chain mover and a deep threat. Olave kind of similar in that way, but more of a deep threat, I would say. And then Shaheed's a deep threat. Building a lot of speed for a vertical passing attack. Just don't have the quarterback that fits with that group at the moment, as Derek Carr is not it and is afraid to take chances down the field. Often leaves plays on the table. Broncos at 15. Johnny Newton. I mean, they need help on the interior of that defensive line so badly. Newton just makes a lot of sense. I know I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. I've talked about Johnny Newton quite a bit in these mock draft videos already. He's a little bit undersized, but a really good pass rusher. I mean, he's a disruptor on the interior. Gets into the backfield quickly, routinely. Really, really good player, but shorter arms, is a bit undersized, no question, but a really, really good player. And we're kind of transitioning into undersized defensive tackles winning with speed and getting more value. And we saw that with the Bucs last year in the first round. Obviously, Johnny Newton is no Aaron Donald, but we've seen Aaron Donald as an undersized defensive tackle dominate for more than a decade up to this point, right? So is Johnny Newton going to be Aaron Donald? Almost nobody's going to even come close, right? But my point is that he's kind of paved the way for undersized defensive tackles to be valued, and we were seeing how productive a lot of these guys can be, right? Geno Atkins as well, kind of in that same vein a little bit before. Steelers at 16. I still think that this really should be a tackle. Could be one of these cornerbacks, since a lot of them are still available, but I think they need offensive line help so bad, and whether it's Talisa Fuaga or Amarius Mims, I think somebody that can really play to their identity of a power run it down your throat football team makes a lot of sense. I'm going to go Amarius Mims this time around. Really athletic and is a fun combination with Broderick Jones. They were teammates a year ago. Cardinals at 17 took Marvin Harrison Jr. earlier. This is pick your poison. What do you want at this point? It's another not super talented roster, and you have 2 first-round picks to work with. And I would probably go corner if I were Arizona. It is a position of need. I think edge is certainly in play as well. Chop Robinson could certainly be the guy. And maybe he even will end up being the guy for me here. Really, really good athlete. Yeah, let's pivot. Let's go edge. Really, really good athlete, and that's kind of what you got right now. Explosive first step, can really speed rush and turn the corner, and that's obviously super valuable. Maybe it's just a designated pass rusher to start, and then maybe he evolves into a more 3-down player, but explosive, twitchy edge rusher. Bills at 18. The Bills are another one of these teams that they could end up taking a lot. They're a good team. They managed to win games, and they crushed the Cowboys yesterday. But they have needs at receiver, at tackle, on the edge, in the secondary. They have a lot of different ways to go about it. Linebacker, especially as well, even though you've got some good play from Terrell Bernard, Tyrell Dodson. Matt Milano, when healthy, is obviously really good, but I don't know how much you can rely on him with injury, unfortunately, lately. But the Bills can go so many different directions, and I love the idea of taking Keon Coleman at this pick. Keon Coleman is a big body jump ball receiver with exceptional ball skills. He just goes up and gets it. 50-50 balls turn into 90-10 balls. He's also a really, really good athlete, and he's able to return punts for FSU, but he just moves differently than your typical 6'4", 215-pound receiver. Keon Coleman and Josh Allen is a really fun combo, especially when you already have Stephon Diggs in the mix there. He's a true #1 big-time X receiver, and I think that's kind of what the Bills could be missing, is something to take the pressure off of a guy like Stephon Diggs a little bit. Give Josh Allen a true #2 option, and that's what Keon Coleman would bring to Buffalo. So, in my opinion, that's just a best player available pick for a team that could go a lot of different ways. Bucks at 19. I keep saying it, but it's another team that feels like they could go so many different directions. And I don't really think it is quarterback. Baker Mayfield was tremendous against the Packers, only visiting quarterback to ever put up a perfect passer rating at Lambeau Field of 158.3. And he's played super well at times this year for the Bucks. It's not just one game. And he's still young enough to where you don't need to take a quarterback here for the future. Is Baker Mayfield your future franchise guy? I don't know about that, but he's good enough right now. And for a team like the Seahawks, you can say the same thing. And good enough is sometimes enough for you to not reach on a position where you could help another part of your team. Their pass rush is not good enough. They allow so many passing yards, so you could certainly upgrade the secondary here. Kind of like, what do you want to do? How do you want to address your terrible pass defense? By getting better pass rushers to get the football out earlier, or better DBs to, when you don't get any pass rush, defend for longer down the field. So it's, again, pick your poison. What do you want to do here? Based on the edge talent available, who could actually get into the first round here? Well, I think that Braylon Trice could. I think Tuimoloau Al probably a bit more likely. I think Chris Braswell certainly could. I think Jack Sawyer maybe at the back end could. I like Jonah Ellis. I don't really think he's going to be a first-round pick. Same thing with Adisa Isaac. You are missing a decent option here, unless he is going back to school. Where is Landon Jackson? Not on here. Maybe I missed it. He's not declaring for the draft. I'm not really sure, but Landon Jackson probably in that conversation of guys that could get pushed up as well. Maybe we do go corner here, just because there are so many good ones still available. Let's go with Alabama's Terrion Arnold. Really good player. I could also see this being Cooper DeJean maybe, but maybe coming back from injury, gets him pushed down a little bit. Could certainly see it. Vikings at 20. I've gone quarterback for them here before quite a lot, and I think it still could be, but maybe Kirk Cousins comes back to Minnesota, and you could do something else and then focus on quarterback next year. Just, are the QBs good enough, or will they actually declare and be draftable? And that's, again, we've talked about all these guys ad nauseum at this point, but I don't know that this is for sure a QB. And I've given the Vikings a quarterback in so many different mock drafts that I've done. You could maybe just plug in J.J. McCarthy here if you'd like to, or Bo Nix if that suits what you want to do. But I am going to go with an edge rusher. It is a position of need. Maybe you're able to re-sign Danielle Hunter. There's been talks about him getting traded or not extended for, it feels like 5 years now for some reason. But even if you do re-sign Danielle Hunter, you need something on the other side. Marcus Davenport, who knows what his future holds. DJ Wanham, is he next up? I don't know that he's going to end up being back. So for Minnesota, edge is a need. I'm going to go JT Tuimoloau from Ohio State. Another big body, probably the biggest in this draft of the guys that could really go in the first round. 6'4", 270. Set the edge, can get after the passer. And this is a guy who we've seen dominate games in the past, and even has done so against Olu Fashanu. So at this point, I think JT Tuimoloau represents pretty good value at a position of need if you don't go QB, which it certainly could be. And then at 21, you have the Rams. Another team that's not really that talented of a roster that could go in so many different areas. And I don't know how they're winning as many games as they are, but credit Sean McVay and the offense. The defense has played as well as they could have up to this point, but you certainly could need help at corner. I like DeJean McKinstry at this pick. Quinion Mitchell could certainly get elevated. Kalen King maybe. At safety, probably wouldn't consider anything. And then the offensive line is a bit of a mess. So you can go with a bunch of different players at this spot. For me, I would probably go corner, DB is not really a position of strength after losing Jalen Ramsey. And Kool-Aid McKinstry available at 21. I like the value a lot. And he's a corner with long arms. He is kind of a passive defender, but that can be a good thing. And what I mean by that is he's calculated, right? He's not really going to just attack you and impress you with his tenacity, but he's a guy that seems to always do the right thing. And he's got long arms to be effective in press coverage. And with a bit of development, Kool-Aid McKinstry could end up being one of the better corners in this draft without question. Without question. Good athlete. At number 22, I have the Indianapolis Colts. Corner, also a need for them, I would say. But do we want to take a corner here? Well, there are some good ones still available. Cooper DeJean will end up being the guy because of his flexibility. And not only do I think he's going to test pretty well, I think he can play on the outside. I do like the idea of him potentially moving inside as well. Obviously, you already have one of the best nickel corners in the league, but you could potentially move him back to safety sometimes. You could move him inside to nickel sometimes. You could move him on the boundary sometimes. He's got tremendous flexibility. He's a great tackler with very good athleticism. And Chris Ballard, of course, loves the athletic players. Cooper DeJean going to check off a lot of boxes when you talk about height, weight, speed, 6'1", 210 pounds. That's going to run pretty well. Another kick returner in this draft of these first-round guys. We've seen a lot of them go off the board. Cooper DeJean, I think Kool-Aid McKinstry's returned kicks and punts for Alabama. Keon Coleman certainly has for FSU. For the Jags, I've often given them an interior offensive lineman in the form of a tackle moving on inside, like Graham Barton or Trey Faatanu. I think I'm going to do that again as well. And we will go with Troy Faatanu from Washington. Might end up being the best offensive guard prospect in this draft. I think he's going to be drafted as a guard. Shorter arms, pushes these good tackles inside, and they often can find a lot of success playing guard. We've seen it many, many times. Faatanu could be the next one up. Bengals at 24. Man, got a bit of a tough spot here because T. Higgins, if you don't decide to franchise tag him, could be finding a new home in 2024. And then after, and maybe even Tyler Boyd as well. So what do you have at receiver? It's Jamar Chase and then Brenton Irwin. That's not great, but you do have some talented receivers that are available. Brian Thomas Jr., Emeka Ibuka, Tez Walker, Ladd McConkey, Troy Franklin. I mean, the receiver class is so good. So good. I mean, I love all of these guys pretty much, right? You have so many talented receivers that can all do different things, really. So this absolutely could be receiver here for the Bengals, but I still just really struggle with their offensive line. And Jonah Williams needs upgrading at right tackle. And plug and play right tackle, there you go. Talisa Fuaga from Oregon State had a great year, is going to the Senior Bowl, so his stock could be up or down depending on how those one-on-ones go. But for right now, it is a starting right tackle to help protect Joe Burrow. At 25 for the Chiefs, you need more weapons on offense. And I love, I think I did this last week as well. I love the idea of giving the Chiefs a legitimate deep threat that can catch. That's Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU. Really, really fun player. And this LSU offense could be one that we talk about a lot down the line. Because obviously we go back, we talk a lot about Joe Burrow and Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and even Terrace Marshall a little bit, right? But in a few years, we could be talking a lot about, we already have this year in college football, but we could be talking about, oh my, can you remember when Jaden Daniels, Brian Thomas Jr., and Malik Neighbors were tearing it up at LSU on the same offense and they didn't really win that many games? I think they ended up finishing stronger, but lost to FSU early on and had some struggles. I think lost to Ole Miss as well. But yeah, it could end up being a legendary type team that, didn't even come close really to competing for an SEC title in 2023. Really, really talented player. Height, weight, speed, freak, long strider with good hands. He gets over the top seamlessly. Texans at 26. Lost Tank Dell to injury. That sucks. Maybe you bring in another receiver. Although I don't think you have to, because you have a number of guys who have been productive. Noah Brown. Maybe John Mechie ends up coming on strong over the next couple of seasons. Nico Collins goes without saying how good he's been. So I would probably like to upgrade the defense here And I like their edge rushers. We could elevate an interior defensive lineman. Maybe this is the rare first linebacker off the board spot. Maybe a Barrett Carter or Jeremiah Trotter sneaks into the first round. I think it's a possibility. Edgerrin Cooper had a great year for A&M as well. Peyton Wilson without injury really could be in that conversation. Is Barrett Carter going back to school? He is. Okay. So it wouldn't be Barrett Carter here, who wouldn't want to play another season at Clemson. I still don't actually know if he's going to be a first-round pick. I would lean probably not, but T'Vondre Sweat had such an incredible season at Texas, hook him, that I think he deserves mentioning him in the first-round conversation. He is about 365 pounds on the defensive line for Texas. He's a nose tackle with surprising quickness for a 360-pounder. And we've seen nose tackles go somewhat high in the draft before. Vita Vea, Mozzie Smith was right around this spot, if not number 26 last year to the Cowboys. Maybe the Texans opt to keep T'Vondre Sweat in Texas and take the Alton Award winner for best overall lineman on either side of the ball in the nation. He was so incredible for Texas in 2023, and you look at a team that already has some pretty good edge rushers. How about T'Vondre Sweat allowing for more one-on-ones when it takes two offensive linemen to block him at 360 pounds? Could be interesting. Cowboys at 27. What would I do if I were the Cowboys? I really consider offensive line for them a lot. I really do. And it'd be tough to go away from that because when you look at the offensive line here, Graham Barton maybe sticks at left tackle or slides inside the left guard. Tyron Smith just can't be counted on long term. Or Graham Barton could play right tackle, or Tyler Smith could play right tackle. And if Barton plays left guard, Smith kicks out to left tackle. You get a lot of flexibility on the offensive line taking a guy like Graham Barton from Duke. And you really could potentially move him all the way down to center. We'll see if that ends up being a thing that happens. At 28, we have the Detroit Lions. I really look to edge a lot for the Lions. They just need something else. Braylon Trice makes a lot of sense to me. 3-down player on the other side of Aiden Hutchinson. And that is a starter pretty much right away. Dolphins at 29. I often go offensive line. I'm not going to change that up to this point. I'm going to go Tyler Guyton. He could be a big riser. Could certainly end up being like a top 20 pick in this draft when all is said and done. This draft has two things in abundance. Maybe even three if we count quarterbacks with their hype, but it's receiver and offensive tackle. Huge in this particular draft class. At 30, we have the Eagles, another team that could take O-line, and you certainly wouldn't mind it. And there are still some really good ones available. Kingsley Suamataia, Patrick Paul, Jordan Morgan. Let's go with one that could use a bit of development, but has, one of the highest ceilings of any of these tackles in this draft. Kingsley Suamataia, I think, would be a fun fit on the Eagles' offensive line. Of course, we know about Stoutland University, right? Jeff Stoutland develops offensive linemen better than anybody. That's why the Eagles have by far the best offensive line in football, it seems, with studs like Jordan Mailata, who was a rugby player that has been developed into being one of the best left tackles in the league. Obviously, we know about Jason Kelsey, Lane Johnson. These guys are phenomenal players, and Jeff Stoutland continues to be a big reason why. Kingsley Suamataia has no pressure to start right away, but could be eventually your starting right tackle once Lane Johnson pursues non-NFL starter-related activities. 49, and he's still great, by the way. I'm just saying, he's into his 30s. How long is he going to last? We don't know. 49ers at 31, another team that needs to really think about taking offensive line. I think a guy like Patrick Paul makes a ton of sense. He just doesn't allow pressures at all at Houston. Now, we did say that for another Houston offensive tackle that ended up getting pushed down the board a little bit, drafted by the Cardinals a few years back. But Paul could end up being a first-round caliber player, and the 49ers need tackle, guard, center, maybe even. Trent Williams not going to be around forever. Patrick Paul could end up being maybe a starting right tackle or a plug-and-play replacement for Trent Williams, depending on when he decides to have whatever weird thing I said for retire for Lane Johnson. And then the Ravens at 32. I do think receivers in play. We don't know about the future of Rashad Bateman in Baltimore or Odell Beckham Jr., both on contract-related things there. Zay Flowers is awesome, but you use somebody else, right? So receiver would be in play, and there are certainly very good receivers here. However, I think their secondary is just not great. And they're starting guys that just really are probably more like role players and rotational guys. And with the athleticism and size of Quinion Mitchell, he could potentially be a starting outside corner right now on the boundary. Probably play him at field corner. You have Marlon Humphrey that can really rotate into the slot. Kyle Hamilton's done a good job, especially playing downhill, but he's been in the slot in that overhang role playing downhill's been so good. But, you know, Quinion Mitchell can be an actual true outside starting corner, and that way Brandon Stevens doesn't have to be your CB1, essentially, if, you know, Marlon Humphrey's injured or we're playing in the nickel. So Quinion Mitchell, I think, makes a ton of sense there. It's a talented cornerback class as well, and that is my mock draft here, Mock Draft Monday, December 18th. Thanks for watching and subscribing. I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.